Welcome everyone to Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. Today's educator and guest musician is our friend Austin Vickrey. And Austin is here with us with a topic that he is calling a piano lesson from a horn player. Why horn players should learn piano. Participants are muted for the courtesy of the session, but we will have the ability to unmute you if you would like to ask a question or use the chat feature. And if you have any specific feedback for the Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation on these sessions, or you'd like to see a special topic, please email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com. We are recording these sessions for the purposes of Clearwater Jazz education and outreach. If you go to our education and outreach page, you'll see the links to join all of the upcoming sessions, and you also see a link to a resource we call the Studio. The Studio archives all the past sessions, so if you weren't able to participate in a live session, in short time you will be able to watch the full recorded video sessions, session recaps, and in many instances, our educators and musicians are working with us to provide session materials, like Austin does, or links to Spotify curated playlists that complement the sessions. And I'm really excited to also introduce our new Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions podcast, which is available where you stream your podcasts. It's up and running on Anchor and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Google Podcasts, and many others. And there's about 30 of the full episodes already up. So if listening is your thing rather than watching, take a look at the podcast. And we thank our podcast presenting sponsor, Marine Max Clearwater, for helping to do that. So Austin is back with us. He's a saxophonist, woodwind specialist, composer, arranger, and music educator who currently resides in St. Petersburg. He was born and raised in Utah and developed a love for music at a young age and was awarded the Louis Armstrong Jazz Award upon graduating high school. He holds a Bachelor of Music in Saxophone Performance from the University of Utah and a Master of Music in Jazz Studies from the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. He has participated and worked as an assistant musical director and an adjunct professor of music at the collegiate level, and he is currently the adjunct woodwind instructor for Johns Hopkins Middle School in St. Petersburg, Florida. In addition to teaching, Austin keeps a busy performing schedule and plays throughout the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area with his own groups and as a sideman. And if you would like to connect with Austin, you can do so on Facebook or visit him at his website, austinvickery.com. Austin, thank you for being a part of these Young Lions Jazz Master virtual sessions. The stage is all yours, my friend.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm very, very grateful and honored and excited to be a part of these wonderful sessions. So again, my enormous thanks to you and everybody at Clearwater Jazz Holiday, and for at the Al Downing. I see Al Downing is sponsoring us. So thank you to the Al Downing Tampa Bay Jazz Association. So, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today and for joining me. I'm excited to give this master class. This master class is about why jazz horn players should learn jazz piano. At first glimpse, maybe it's kind of an obvious thing. I mean, I went to school to learn about jazz, so I was mandated to take a jazz piano course. And I've never been the best piano player. I had to take, as a music major in my undergrad, a classical basic piano skills course. You have to, if you study music on the collegiate level, you have to go through some sort of piano class. And it was just a nightmare for me. I hated it. The classical one, it was just tough. The dexterity and trying to get your hands, going in different directions and at different rhythms with everything was quite a challenge. With jazz piano, I did that at the graduate level, and I was really really excited about that, because I found so many more applications out of that for what I wanted to do and accomplish as a musician. So I'm just going to go over some of those things about what I feel is important to any jazz horn player out there. And this can go across to anyone who's interested in even just learning about jazz piano, because clearly my skills are very minimum. I'm not going to rip off a piano solo today. I just don't have that ability. If I could work at it if I really wanted to, but my goal in jazz piano is going to be kind of stated here in the discussion topics. And I'm a chord fanatic. I absolutely love chords, and I love theory. Music theory is like my thing. I absolutely love it, and I will talk about it to anybody for days. So I'll jump right in here. My discussion topics are going to be why are we learning this jazz piano as a horn player? Well, one, I think it helps in understanding theory, chords, and harmony on a deeper level than just playing it on a saxophone or a trumpet or a non-chordal instrument. My second topic is how to use jazz piano as a compositional aid, because many jazz horn players write their own music and want to write their own music. So I hope they do. I know I do. And I've used the piano as a tool to actually compose songs other than just playing on my saxophone. So I'll sit at the piano and work out some chords, or I could even work out a melodic line, just roughly with maybe no time involved. So it's not, I'm not trying to do something super technical, but I'm trying to work something out. And we'll talk more about that, how that's important and how that helps you as a horn player and as a musician. The third topic is using jazz piano as a teaching tool for students. So many horn players may not be professional horn players, but they may be teachers. And if you are teaching a horn player about improvisation, whatnot, this is a very useful skill to have. Another topic we're going to talk about is increasing and deepening your song/tune knowledge. As a jazz horn player, we're required to learn melodies and jazz tunes, and I'm going to talk about how the piano is helpful in increasing your knowledge there. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some just basic piano chord voicings that anybody can learn and do and use immediately for teaching or playing or composition wise or whatever your needs are. Just a beginning. And then I will also wrap it up with a list of sources for further study. So I've got at least 3 really, really good books for folks who are interested in learning about jazz piano. All right, so first topic, understanding theory and chords. So jazz piano is a great way to further your own understanding of music theory, chords, and harmony. One of the reasons I think that's true is because the piano is a visual instrument. When I say visual, it means you can actually see what you're doing. You can look at your fingers, you can look at the keys, and actually see what it is you're doing. What the chord is, where the melody moves, how the chords move from chord to chord in a song. You can see what you're playing or what you're hearing. Similar instruments that have this ability to see what they're doing is a guitar player or a bass player, string players, where they can actually look down their fretboard and see what they're doing. If you're a horn player, you can't necessarily always see what you're doing, although trumpets can see their fingers do the vowels, but it's kind of a straight line, so at least they have the fingers in front of them. With saxophone, I cannot see what I'm doing on my fingers. I just can't. I cannot do this. Oh, I can just look and see. I can't really do that. I have to rely on feel. And jazz piano also relies on feel as well. Once you start learning about voicings, because if you're going to read music or read chords, you can't always be looking down at the piano. You have to be able to memorize the keyboard and go by feel. And that's how professional piano players do it, whether they play jazz or classical. They are relying on feel, but they play it so much that they get used to that. Learning jazz piano also assists in providing a basic understanding and knowledge of how chords are constructed, how they are used in songs, and what they sound like. Understanding the construction of a chord is really important, at least in the jazz world. It's important to understand the context of how these chords are used and how they are played in a song, in any particular song that a student may be learning or a person may be learning. And it's also important to be able to hear what the chord sounds like. I mean, this is an aural skill. On a saxophone, and I'll address this. We can't play chords. Saxophone can't play chords. I mean, we can play harmonics, which is a totally different thing. It's similar to chords, but not in the chord way that a piano can you just play 3 or 4 notes, boom, right at the same time. You can't do that on a saxophone. So any chord that you play on a piano can be translated to a horn or a melodic instrument, non-chordal instrument, by the way of arpeggios. And arpeggio, if you're not familiar with that, that's just a fancy word for a broken chord. So just real quick, if I can demonstrate on the piano, and Steve and I were talking, the volume on this piano might not be super great. So I'll do my best and hopefully it will serve a little bit of purpose. But if I want to play a basic 3-note chord, like a C major chord, on the piano, I can just push the 3 notes required. And I get a chord. Super easy. But on a horn, you have to play each of those notes separately. You can't play them at the same time. So that's called an arpeggio. So we can turn that word into a verb and say, we're going to arpeggiate the chord. So I play 1 note at a time, C, E, and G. Okay, so that is arpeggiating the chord. Now, it's really weird here with my keyboard. For some reason, whenever I hit the note E, my speaker rattles. And I don't have super pro speakers, so it gives such an interesting sound. One other thing about understanding theory and chords is jazz piano allows you to work through chords and arpeggios on your horn. And doing that is a great exercise in ear training, increasing your technique, and helps improve your ability to get around on your instrument. Because if you're going to be a jazz horn player, you've got to be able to get around on your instrument with ease and facility. So this is going to help you practicing these chords on the instrument and knowing where they are in the piano so that you can translate it onto your instrument. Super important, in my opinion. So I'm going to just talk briefly about how to get started. Like, jazz piano, there's a lot encompassing in that. Maybe if you're a horn player, maybe you're a beginning jazz horn player, you may not know a lot about theory or chords, and understanding how to do this jazz piano, and even on your own instrument, you really do need to have a basic knowledge of theory and chords and harmony. So I want to list some ways that somebody can go about doing that, getting that knowledge. Fairly easy, actually. The first one that I recommend is getting a private teacher. Just a private teacher on your instrument or even on piano. I took very little piano lessons when I was a kid. I wished I would have done them more. It just wasn't kind of at the time. It was before I even knew about saxophone. But I learned more about how to get around on my instrument and about theory by looking at the keyboard, because it's all just right there. You can just see it, which is amazing. Another way you can learn about jazz piano is there are educational facilities called colleges that you can sign up for a class as a non-matriculated student, meaning that you're not pursuing a degree, you're just signing up, and take like a basic intro to music theory or intro to music course. You know, obviously there's some cost involved there that may be more considerable than a private lesson teacher, but you are going to get more of a structured, you know, structured assignments and material that you can go over. So sometimes a class may be helpful. Locally here in the Tampa Bay area, we have two great colleges that, well, actually three, I think, that do offer some really good music courses. I know for a fact because I used to teach at St. Petersburg College. They do have courses, and I used to teach one called Fundamentals of Music. And we just talked about the basic theory of music from the beginning to, you know, from note reading to understanding 4-note chords and 7th chords and music harmony, basic music harmony. So that's a good source. We've got USF in Tampa. We've got Hillsborough Community College. I also used to teach at Eckerd College. I don't know if anybody knows that, but I did. I taught at Eckerd College for a brief moment. So, well, actually a couple brief moments. So there are resources here for you to access on the college level. And then another really great source, and I am just a big advocate of this source, and it's going to be shared in this PDF that I'm reading from as my guide. It's musictheory.net, www.musictheory.net. This site is probably my favorite source for learning about music theory just from the beginning. I use it with my middle school kids. I use it in private lessons. I've used it in college. I've used it with adults. It's super easy to navigate. It's online for free. You don't have to pay. There's no subscription or anything. It's free information and education. It's incredible. It's a interactive website. It's got examples, visuals. It's incredible. So I encourage you, if you are interested in any kind of music theory or learning about how to read music, rhythm, scales, notes, everything about music that's a starter kit, I would visit this website. Absolutely. Very, very good. All right. So next topic. Using jazz piano, as a compositional or arranging aid. So understanding theory, harmony, and chords on the piano is a useful tool in composing and arranging. I've used it considerably. I've written songs purely on the piano, and it's wonderful. It's just such a great tool to have in your pocket or in your bag of tricks. We like to say we have great euphemisms in music, especially in jazz. We call like your bag of tricks. You know, what can you do? I just think it's invaluable as a musician, just a general musician. In terms of you're able to work out your original ideas, maybe in a different way that you haven't thought of before. You know, if you're always just on your one instrument trying to work stuff out, you know, you get used to a certain way of doing things. And so when you translate it to something different, or not necessarily different, but in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, I think, the piano is such a universal instrument in music. I think everybody who studies music should study piano. I don't care if you're a classical person, classical horn player, if you're a band director, if you work in the music field, you should have a basic knowledge of piano, period. That's just my thought on that. But, you know, being able to work stuff out on a different platform can actually give you more ideas and maybe free you up and maybe make you or help you think about something in a completely different way. So I think that's valuable too. Now, understanding chords and voicings, that means how the chord is arranged on the piano, how it's stacked with the notes, you know, from bottom to top, or from low to high, really is what I should say, low to high. Using these voicings as a way to arrange horn parts for your musical ensemble. Say you're a teacher or an educator, or you know, maybe you want to write an arrangement of some sort. Understanding these chord voicings can be directly translated to melodic or non-chordal instruments. So say like a saxophone quartet, or a brass quintet, or a concert band. You know, it's fairly easy to, or jazz band. You know, I've written a couple of arrangements for jazz band. Being able to sit and look at the piano and say, okay, I'm going to put the tenor saxophone here, but I'm going to put the alto saxophone here, maybe a second alto here. And so now I can kind of, you know, figure it out. Unfortunately, if you're using a piano, it's not going to sound like a saxophone. So you're not going to get the true sound. You can use a music writing software program or a music notation program, and there are several out there. The two big ones are Sibelius and Finale. They're expensive, you know, they're super pro. I use Sibelius, but there's a couple of free ones out there. MuseScore, MUSE.score, or MuseScore is a free program you can use. And then let's see, there's another one called NoteFlight, and it has some basic notation stuff. But we're not here to talk about notation. We're here to talk about piano. But anyway, if you want to learn more about that, you know, you can reach out to me about horn arranging. I do it all the time. I do it for the wedding band that I work in, and I use piano as a way to gauge, you know, range for instruments and how it's going to sound as I write it down, because I don't play trumpet very well, and I definitely don't play trombone. You know, I can't play those instruments to hear what it's going to sound like before I write it down. So, you know, this is a good way to kind of get an idea of how to arrange. So, and there's some rules within arranging that we usually talk about, but I don't want to get into that. That can be saved for another time, or for somebody who's going to do a masterclass on arranging. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Jazz piano as a teaching tool for students. So I have a couple of points here that I want to just make. Jazz piano, or knowing jazz piano, allows you to visually demonstrate concepts of theory, chords, and harmony. And this is just an invaluable tool. You know, a lot of students are more visual learners, so it helps them to see what you're doing. Looking at a keyboard is just one of those things, or looking at, you know, maybe a guitar fretboard. For me, the guitar is just, it's overwhelming because there's so many choices. You can play the same note in several different places. So it's a different type of platform. And for me, it overwhelms me. And I can play a little guitar, like maybe this much. But you know, it's still a visual aid, and visual aids are wonderful in the teaching and learning process. You can also use jazz piano if you're a horn teacher. If you teach lessons on for saxophone or trumpet, or an instrument that's going to do some improvising or learning about jazz, you can accompany your students and use that. You know, so you know, nowadays we've got great programs out there that will do accompanying for you. But you know, if we ever get back to those days of you know, in-person lessons, I hope that happens, because there's something lost to me in the, you know, not being right there with the student, in that interaction, you know, where you sit at the piano while they're, you know, next to you, and they hear what you're doing, so they they respond to it, and you can kind of you can show them what's going on, and you can help them and be their accompanist. And I think it's more fun to work with a live person than it is a backing track. That's just my opinion as a musician. So hopefully we can get back to that point. So we do the best we can now with what we've got. So but anyway, those are the two really wonderful teaching ways that you can use jazz piano as a teaching tool for your students. All right, let's move on. So for horn players, this is mostly geared towards horn players, but it can be geared towards anybody. Increasing your tune knowledge, knowing jazz piano and learning how to play through the chords. This is going to help you learn the songs that you need to learn as a jazz horn player. Studying jazz typically requires learning songs from the tradition. So the tradition, we mean the Great American Songbook, Cole Porter, George Gershwin, those kinds of things. Standards in the repertoire, we call them standards. And also jazz standards. So maybe that music or jazz tunes that don't have lyrics to them, compositions by Miles Davis or Herbie Hancock or Charlie Parker or whatnot. Those are jazz standards. So being able to play through those, playing the chords on the piano to a song that you're trying to learn increases your understanding of the tune and assists in retention and memorization. So I can practice a melody all day long on my saxophone, and then I can try to memorize those chords, by either looking at a piece of music or by just trying to arpeggiate the chords on my instrument, which is, how you would learn chords that way. But if you add the element of the piano to that learning process, and being able to play the chords to the song you're learning, I mean, for me, that just solidifies in my brain that song that much more. So I'm actually compounding my learning when I'm doing that. So I think it's super important. And when I want to learn a new tune, I always try to learn the melody and the chords on the piano first. I don't, I have a pretty good ear, with my experience on saxophone, so I can pick up a melody pretty quickly on saxophone. But being able to sit down and see the structure of the melody, see it on a piano, not just see it in the sheet music, but see it on the piano, that helps me conceptualize the song or internalize it. So it helps with my memorization of the song. And playing the chords helps me understand the chord progression more, where I can go, oh, I recognize how these chords work a little bit better, other than just thinking about them. I get to play them and internalize them and make them happen physically. That helps. That's like a muscle memory thing. It's like learning another instrument. So it's going to help increase your memorization rate and the retention of those songs. Because as a jazz horn player, we got to know a lot of tunes, because we don't know when somebody's going to call that crazy tune that nobody plays. Oh, hey, we're going to play Stablemates. Stablemates? Oh, no. I might be in trouble. So in increasing your tune knowledge, you can see the chord. I think I talked about that. I'm looking at my notes here. I think I started kind of going off on a tangent. You can see and hear how the chords in a particular song relate to each other, rather than relying on, say, a backing track or an actual a piano player with you. Even though I prefer playing with an actual piano player, you don't have to look at them and say, hey, what's the chord over there? Like if you know what's going on, then you don't need that. So I think being able to play this stuff at the piano is going to better prepare you for whatever situation you're going to be in as a jazz horn player. And it's a cross-platform learning type of thing. Learning a concept or idea on multiple instruments also assists in your retention and memorization of what you're trying to do. Ooh, I need a drink. And it's water, not... whatever you are drinking at home, cheers to you. Okay. So now here comes the part where I'm going to talk about just some simple, basic piano voicings for some simple chords. And I've got this all laid out in my PDF. I will do a little bit of demonstrating, but I know that the sound may not be super great on the piano. So I won't be doing a ton of it, but I will do a little bit of it. So I hope that that will help. And to do that, I'm going to kind of angle this, I think, a little bit more closely to the piano so you can kind of just see a little bit of what I'm doing. Okay, so we have the basic 3-note chord called a triad. And a triad is just 3-note chord, and it's arranged in what's called an interval of a third, thirds apart. So every other note, basically. If I just play a simple triad, a C triad, C major, then we just have C, E, G. Can't see my pinky, but okay, C, E, G. That's just a basic block chord, root position chord. Anybody can learn how to play these. You can play every other white key all the way up and ignore the black keys, and you've got triads. It's great. So there you go, basic triads. We also have what's called inversions of triads. So if I take the bottom note, which is the C, and I move it up over here, but I keep the other two. So I E, G, C. Now I have the same chord, but a different voicing. So it's rearranged differently. So it's a slightly different sound, but it's the same chord. This is all about facility on the piano. This is technique that beginning piano players learn from almost day one. So there are different inversions of that. I won't go into too much more detail because I'm not here to do a super big theory lesson, but you can find that information on the musictheory.net page as well. We have other chords called seventh chords, and they just add another note on top of the triad. So if we do C, E, G, and I add the next note, we assume that it's the every other note, then it would be a B. So we'd have this. And that's just a C major seventh chord. And we have inversions of that. You just take the first note, move it up over top. You're playing leapfrog with the notes. So with this, you can have 4 different positions of a seventh chord, while with the triads, you have 3 different positions. So understanding these positions is important to understanding how to get all around on the piano for jazz voicings and jazz chords. You can play these with 1 hand or 2. It doesn't matter. I'm not here to talk about piano technique and, oh, well, you have to use this finger and you have to use, that's not my specialty. I don't think you have to know that unless your goal is to play piano at a high level. Then you can take from a piano player and learn how to finger, or what fingers to use and all of that. I'm not saying that's not important. It definitely is. But just for the purposes of understanding chords and understanding basic theory and getting around, you can just, I could say you could just use the claw, claw type of, and I know several teachers that do that. They're not professional piano players, but they can get around on the piano, and they're not using, oh, well, you have to use finger number 4 to hit B flat. They don't do that. Okay. And that's fine. That's fine. I think we can play a little bit loose with the rules in jazz, and we often do. So that's my justification for not using proper fingerings or whatever. But a lot of these shapes will conform to your hand pretty naturally. So you can play one hand, two hands, it doesn't matter. If we keep going, for triads or 3-note chords, not all songs have 3-note chords. So you can actually play two triads, one in one hand and one in the other. Yeah, it sounds better. And thicken up the sound. So you can double, that's called doubling. You can double the chords and it will give you a more rich texture, thicker texture. You can spread the notes out over the keyboard a little bit more, and maybe something like this. I'm just taking those notes and I'm spreading them out, and it might have a thinner texture. So here's the basic triad, and here's the spread out version of that. So I know the higher notes probably are a little bit harder to hear, but you can spread that out. And I do that in my horn arranging. So you want to have a certain amount of space between the notes. It can't be all crunched in together or it starts to sound really muddy. You can use just block chords, which is the first type of thing we talked about, to get around on the piano. These books that I'm going to recommend at the end have a lot more detail about how you can learn how the voicings work and what fingers to use and all of that. So I don't want to go too much more into that. A couple of quick voicings that I want to give for anybody who just wants to kind of pick it up quickly. If you already have a little bit of music theory knowledge and you just want to apply it on the piano, here's a couple of really great voicings that work really, really well. There's some of the basic ones that you can use. The first one is called a shell voicing, okay? And what you do is you put the name or the root of the chord in your left hand, like you're playing a bass, and then you put the other chord tones in your right hand. And there's a couple of different configurations that are listed in this PDF. I'm not going to go over all of them right now, but so here's one, and it sounds really nice. I like this one. For a C major, we call this a C major 6-9 chord. It's a very happy chord. So there's a chord on its own, just the shell, and it's just the other chord tones. That's all it is. I could adjust that and make it sound different and call it a major 7 just by changing one note. I could just change one note and I could turn it into a different type of chord. So it's very little and very subtle, but I mean, you know, what sounds good to you? You kind of trust your ear, you know, as you learn about music theory and stuff, your ear starts to take over and you can learn about, okay, well, I'm going to choose this voicing over this voicing. So, and that just comes in the learning process. And you can, again, you know, these books I'm going to tell you will tell you all of that. Couple of more voicings and then I'll mention the books. One that's really fun to do is called a modal voicing. It sounds very what's called fourthy, means the notes are 4 notes apart. And when I say modal, if anybody has heard of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album, that's kind of like your basic intro to jazz album. Everybody should own it. But that is a kind of like a modal album. He uses chords that are modal, and modal is just another word for like scale, really. But a lot of these modal voicings are for tunes like that are minor. So if anyone's heard of So What by Miles Davis, you know, let's see. You know, that kind of ba-do, 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 ba-da, bum, bum. That song, if you go listen to that song, totally modal. But there's some really great voicings that you can use. So that kind of a sound, that's what we call like a modal voicing or fourth, and it works really well with minor sounding tunes that use one particular scale. I've got that listed. I don't need to spend more time on that. The final voicings that I like to go over, and I don't want to get too voicinged out, but I've listed it in great detail in this PDF, and I'll just show you one version of it. But they're called 2571 voicings, or short 251 voicings. And this is just a phrase that we use in jazz education and harmony and music education and harmony to describe a chord progression, a series of chords that happen in the song. So there's just ways that you can voice and that you can learn how to play through a song and just get through it, and to accompany it, you know, or accompany somebody. So one of the voicings that I have here is kind of spread out for a D. It's called a D minor 7. And I'm using the root and the 7th. So my hand is spread out and I'm using these two fingers. And then I use the 3rd and the 5th on top of that. So I'm taking the chord and I'm breaking it up and spreading it out. So the next series would be the 5 chord, and that's a G dominant 7th chord. Well, to get to that, all I have to do is move my thumb. Let's see, yeah, move my thumb and my index finger to the G and the B in my left hand, and I don't have to move my right hand at all. And then to get to the last chord, I just have to reach down with my pinky and hit the C for a C major, C and B, that's 1 and 7, and then shift my right hand over 1 note each. So once you get the feeling of that, you'll be able to just, you know, play through this 2-5 harmonic progression, and you know, you can do exercises in every key, and I recommend that, and these books do that. They write it all out for you, so you can sit and they show you, okay, well, use your finger here. You know, it's really simple. One of the books comes with a CD. It's great. I'm going to show you in a second. But here's the progression. And I mean, I've done that in that key for so long, I don't have to look at the keys. I can just feel it. But yeah, so you know, I can go through and play a series of these chords like this. And I can get around on the piano a little bit. You know, I'm not saying you have to be fast. You don't have to be fast. We're doing this for the purpose of deepening your own knowledge and help. I mean, if you can take it as far as you want to take it. That's the great thing about this. So I won't go into too many more. I mean, I've got several examples of 2571 voicings in this PDF. You can access that with the session materials in the clearwaterjazz.com/education page in the studio. It'll be archived. It's a free PDF. It's what I've been using to give this masterclass, and it's free for any of you who want to access it and read through it. The books, and then I think we will wrap this up. The books that I recommend, I've got 3 books. There are so many books, guys, on this subject. There's tons, but these came recommended to me by private instructors and also college instructors. So I've got 3 really great books that I think will really help if anybody is learning. This is for anyone, not just horn players, but anybody who wants to learn, jazz piano. So the first one is called Jerry Coker's Jazz Keyboard. I get a glare. Jazz Keyboard for the pianists and non-pianists for class and individual study. This is such a wonderful book. And look, I mean, it's thin, and it's probably, I don't know, it might be more expensive than $12.95. I got this a while back, but this is such a wonderful book, and it's simple, and it lays out everything. It gives you a crash course in, the theory that you need to know to get through the chords and understand what they are and play them. It's fantastic. You'll be playing stuff out of the piano, jazz chords, very quickly with this book. This is a wonderful book. The second one, and I'm a big advocate of this because the person who wrote this was my former jazz keyboard and combo director, or jazz keyboard professor and combo director at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. And he is recently retired, but he is fantastic. He's a wonderful instructor, and his book is incredible. You may or may not have heard of him. His name is Phil DeGreg, and he wrote this book called Jazz Keyboard Harmony. It comes with a CD, although I don't know. This is quite an old copy. This is probably from 2001. So, he may or may not have updated it with, maybe say a link to MP3s or downloads or something. I don't know. You'd have to check that out. But this is a wonderful, wonderful book. It's a little thick, but it's got fantastic illustrations. I've got notes. We had to play a melody with a simple notes in the bottom, the left hand. So we're working, learn how to do play a melody in your right hand while you're playing chords in the left. So this is a wonderful, wonderful book. I highly recommend it if you want to take your keyboard skills to the next level. This is an excellent book. The third book I've got for you, and this was recommended by a saxophone player, one of my former saxophone instructors. And this is called Jazz Piano Voicing Skills. Sorry for the glare. A Method for Individual or Class Study by Dan Hurley. And this is a wonderful, wonderful book. It's got more of just flat out voicings, and it gets a little bit more advanced than, say, the Coker book or Phil DeGreg's book. But, this would be for the, person who's done some study on jazz piano, that you're a horn player and you're trying to learn more, and you really want to take it to, hey, maybe I want to play a gig. Maybe I want to actually play a gig. This is a fantastic book, and I haven't gone through all of it. I did back in the day, and my jazz piano skills have kind of dropped off a little bit since then. But I highly recommend this book as well. It's got a little bit of theory in there and some really great explanations and some advanced chords that you can start to learn and sound great on. But yeah, this is a wonderful book. So that does it for me. And my last little advice is, if you want to learn, you got to listen. So for me to sit here and list jazz piano players, that's impossible. We would be here for over 24 hours, I'm sure. So all you got to do is just Google in list of jazz piano players and just go listen. Have a field day. You know, make a Spotify list. I didn't give a Spotify list to Steve just because it would just be too large, too huge. Excuse me. So, you know, just go listen. And yeah, that's all I've got. So I hope you've enjoyed it.
Well, I certainly have. What a great session today, Austin. Man, you're always going all in with this stuff, and it's just so refreshing to have you participating. We can't thank you enough. We've got some really great upcoming sessions. You can check them out on our education and outreach page. We had a wonderful session earlier today from Brandon Robertson, who is the director of jazz at the Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, who kind of on the same theme today. It's kind of interesting how these lined up, but Brandon's session was thinking like a horn player from a bass perspective, which was kind of cool. And so that session will be up on our studio archive shortly, as will this one. And we've just got some really great additional sessions coming up this week, next week, and programmed into August now. On Thursday, we have James Suggs joining us again on trumpet with different approaches to swing. And Brandon Robertson's back with us on a topic he's calling Raising the Bar, Preparing for Performance. James Suggs and Dwayne are doing a fun topic together on some of their favorite trumpet solos. So good stuff for trumpet players coming up. And Austin's going to be back with us. He's coming back on July 21st for how to incorporate bebop into your improvisation, which is set to be a good one. We've got Valerie Gillespie signed up for later in the month, Pete Carney, who's going to be back with his Safer at Home practicing series, and we've got some jazz vocalists coming on board later. There's just so much great material and information to share. So please, please return and pass along to your friends that we're doing this. All of these sessions are free. They're up in the studio, they're in our podcast, and it's all out there. So Austin, thanks for being part of this, man.
Steve, thank you so much. I just have so much fun, and I'm super honored, and it's just wonderful. So thank you for including me, and I hope that it helps. And if anybody, you know, has any questions, they can feel free to reach out. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right, everybody. Thanks for participating today and in the future. Stay safe, be well, and keep playing.
Sounds good. Take care.